All right, here we go.
We're in the water. Oh my God. हेलो जी, क्या हाल चाल आप लोगों का? ठीक ठाक हैं? अभी हम लोग आए हैं जी इस दफ़ा हैलिफैक्स नोवा स्कोशिया। तो हम लोग यहाँ पे बिल्कुल वाटर फ्रंट पे हैं। तो हमने सोचा कि चलो थोड़ा सा आप लोगों को डाउनटाउन दिखाते हैं। हैलिफैक्स का एक टूर है यहाँ पे बहुत ज़बरदस्त हार्बर हॉपर का। तो हमने आज वो करना है, तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग होएगा। हमारे साथ जुड़े रहें, आपको दिखाते हैं। ठीक है, तो वीडियो स्टार्ट करते हैं यहाँ से। तो ये लोकेशन बहुत ही प्यारी है। वो सामने आप देख सकते हैं, थोड़ा आइलैंड वगैरह है, बिल्कुल सामने आप देख सकते हैं वो सामने आइलैंड। तो ये जो जगह है ये बहुत ही इन्होंने मेंटेन की हुई है, काफ़ी ज़बरदस्त किस्म की। यहाँ से आगे जाके उन्होंने कहा है कि लाइन अप करना है आपने जाके आगे। तो चलें साथ साथ चलते हैं आगे। चलें शाहजेब, फिर चलें, लेट्स गो। तो जी ये देखें आ गया है हार्बर हॉपर। तो ये इसकी इंटरेस्टिंग बात ये है कि पहले ये हमें हैलिफैक्स सिटी का टूर करवाएगा और उसके बाद फिर यही जो है ये पानी के अंदर चला जाएगा और ये पानी के अंदर एज अ बोट बन के हमें वाटर फ्रंट दिखाएगा। तो देख सकते हैं काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ है। तो इसमें काफ़ी मज़ा आने वाला हमें। तो ज़बरदस्त है, देख लें। मतलब पहले शहर का टूर करेंगे रोड पे, फिर उसके बाद हम लोग पानी में जाके तो बोट एज अ बोट ही चलेगा पानी के अंदर। तो चलें हमारे साथ रहें, वो आपको दिखाते हैं कि कैसा इंटरेस्टिंग ये ज़बरदस्त चीज़ है। तो ये देखें जी, ये इसकी पीछे से स्टेयर्स खुल रही हैं। तो अभी जो लोग अंदर एक टूर करके आए हैं वो उतरेंगे नीचे, फिर उसके बाद हम बैठेंगे जल के। इसके टायर देख सकते हैं आप लोग कितने बड़े हैं बहुत ही ज़्यादा बड़े टायर इसके। तो लाइक इट सीम्स लाइक कि पहले शायद ये, मुझे लगता है कि इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग, इट वाज अ मिलिट्री व्हीकल। तो बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त है ये। तो ये देखें जी, हम लोग गए हैं बैट। तो यहाँ पे दिखाते हैं कि कौन कौन। इधर देखें जी आमिर भाई, तो देखते हैं, एंजॉय करते हैं, बड़ा मज़ा आने वाला लगता है। अभी ये फुल होएगा तो फिर चलते हैं आगे हम। आज बारिश है तो उन्होंने कवर किया हुआ पर्सन, ये देखिए ज़बरदस्त। तो बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ होने वाली है, देखिए।
To be your driver and captain, and with me is the incredible Catherine, who will not only be your guide but also your first mate. And when it comes to Catherine, just so you know, she knows all the Halifax. 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 Okay, all right. Before we hit the road, a couple things I need to tell you. To begin with, this vehicle is quite wide, both 13 feet wide. Yet the streets in Halifax are more like 10 feet wide. So that means we will be getting close to buses, stop signs, trees, illegally parked Amazon delivery trucks, and who knows what else. So please keep your arms, legs, phones, cameras, anything of value inside the Harbor Hopper. So we have people visiting from all over, I know, but I'm curious, do we have any Maple Leaf fans on board? You looked around before you put your hand up. I wonder why that is. Well, just to put things into perspective, this vessel was built around the last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup. So that means it's extremely old. And like other things out of the 60s, myself included, this old duck, well, let's just say she's aging gracefully. It creaks, it rattles, it shakes, makes strange sounds, it's very loud, and that's normal, so please don't be concerned. But if there was an area of concern, it would be this. No seat belts and no suspension. Well, I have a seatbelt, but you don't. So I would ask that you please remain securely seated as we hop along the bumpy streets of Halifax.
Driving past the Halifax Public Gardens. This is an example of a Victorian style garden, and in order to be held to those standards, we do like to see a couple of things. One thing that we like to see is paths wide enough for two people in full Victorian hoop skirts to comfortably walk side by side. Just mind the trees as we come by. Now, admittedly, the full Victorian hoop skirt is not exactly in fashion in 2023. However, every June it is prom season, and we do get to see those big poofy prom dresses walking side by side, proving that the paths are wide enough to be held to those standards. And if any of you did pack your full Victorian hoop skirt for this trip, I've got the perfect spot for you. Another thing that we like to see is a pond with at least one replica model of a ship. Now, our pond typically has two, a model of the Sackville, which we'll see in the harbor, and a model of the Titanic. A bit ironically, the Ducks love to perch on the Titanic. They have weighted it down for the season. It is undergoing repairs. If you go to the gardens and you don't see the model of the Titanic, I'm not lying, the ducks are just a pain, and they love a bit of irony. Alright, as we continue along, you are going to see those beautiful Halifax Public Garden front gates looking very at home here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. They did not always call Halifax their home, however, as they were originally built for a public garden in Edinburgh, Scotland. This public garden went bankrupt. They were charging an admission fee for people to see the gardens, and the people of Edinburgh, Scotland really did not want to pay. Thank you very much. And we paid them to ship them over here. You might notice the front section is not open. That's only ever open for royalty. The last time was in the 80s for Diana. So until royalty decides to come back and visit us, it'll just be the side sections that stay open to the public there. Alright, we'll wait till we make this turn and then we'll keep going. Welcome to Spring Garden Road. This is the busiest pedestrian street east of Montreal and north of Boston. You'll see a number of local restaurants, cafes, banks, pharmacies, etc. Happy to make recommendations for anything after the tour. Lie underneath. This was once a poorhouse, and as people passed, we buried them where we could and continued on with construction. From that library down the street to the cemetery that we are coming up on, we are driving over in mass grave. I'll mention the cemetery again in a moment. I do want to point out St. Mary's Basilica, hosting north. A lovely sign for him every summer. Hello, Harbor Hopper. It goes up in April and it comes down in November. And I always know the season's really begun when I get to see that sign come up. All right, we are getting close to the water, which is so exciting. Best part of the whole tour.
Maximum speed.
Alright, here we go.
We're in the water! Oh my god!
Alright, welcome to Halifax Harbor. Can I hear you for Captain Jeff in that awesome spot? Hey, I told you he's good. Alright, you are now sitting on the second deepest natural ice-free harbor in the world, second deepest only to Sydney, Australia. We're home to plenty of critters in this harbor, including jellyfish, seals, sometimes sharks. There is a great white named Jane who often likes to come in near the islands. We haven't seen her this summer, but if you look up our shark tracker online, you can see where she's been. Just out of the harbor, you do often get to see minke whales. Now, another thing that we can find in the Halifax Harbor is an entire fleet of Volvos. Yes, the car. So if you go to the Bedford Basin, which is about 1 kilometer or 1.2 miles past the bridges behind us, there is about a set of about 30 Volvos that you'll see there. So back in the 1960s, business practices were a little shakier, we'll say, than they are today. As this fleet of Volvos was transported across the ocean, none of them were secured properly, and they received some pretty bad weather. Every single and has absolutely no idea how he lost every single one of them off of the side of his boat to the bottom of the Bedford Basin. The large insurance payout that he received afterwards leads me to believe that that might not exactly be the case, but I'll never know for sure. What I do know is that if you're in the market for a new car, I might recommend a scuba diving suit and a trip to the Bedford Basin. Coming up, we've got Purdy's Tower. It's absolutely stunning with all of those big, beautiful glass windows. Easy day sails and evening cruises, so they're absolutely beautiful. Coming just past the Sofa, we do have the Queen's Mark. In luxury condo construction, condos go anywhere from $3.5 to $5 million Canadian, which admittedly is a touch out of my budget at this point in my life, but maybe someday. This tall glass piece is an art piece known as the Beacon. It's meant to showcase the rise and fall of the tide throughout the day, so as the tide rises, the bars of light light up along the side, and at high tide, the whole thing sparkles, and it's time of year for it. I'll let you guys enjoy that for a moment. So I'm really putting on a show for you guys. Start preparing for that bump as we get back up onto the ramp here in just a moment. Alright, welcome back to Dryland. We are once again a bus, your driver, and your tour guide, as opposed to a boat, your captain. Nearby Portsmouth, and they wanted to help out, but they were completely iced over due to some bad winter weather. We here in Halifax actually do not ice over despite bad weather, due to our depth and due to the fact that we are a saltwater harbor. So we were able to get a team of ships together and get out there, but unfortunately in all of the time that it took to do so, it did turn much more from a rescue mission into a recovery mission. Still, we were able to recover quite a few bodies and quite a few artifacts. We buried about 150 of those bodies throughout Halifax, most notably in the Fairview Lawn Cemetery. And it was in order to honor this connection, and also because of how beautiful our harbor is, that the director of the Titanic movie decided to film large portions of the Titanic movie water scenes out on our very own Halifax harbor. So has anybody here ever seen the Titanic movie? Lots of us. It's a classic, right? Well, you were just sitting on the very same harbor where they filmed loads of those scenes, including the scene where Rose drops the amulet into the water. And it was especially because of the Titanic connection that people were coming out every summer to see the water, to see the artifacts in the museum, and most importantly, to see the Fairview Lawn Cemetery. One summer, out in this cemetery, the tombstone of J. Dawson was discovered, and for those of us who don't know, Jack Dawson was the main love interest in the Titanic movie, played by a very dreamy young Leonardo DiCaprio. As I'm sure we might be able to imagine, because of that, most people thought that he was buried out here in Halifax. Let's just say that things went a little wild. spot. I'm so sorry. Alright, Jack Dawson. He was not buried here in Halifax. Sorry for the spoilers. One of our local historians sat down, she looked into it, because she had a little bit of trouble believing that a fictional character from a movie would be buried here in Halifax, but she said, no, there's nothing to do except find out for sure. She looked into it and discovered that no, of course, Jack Dawson from the Titanic movie was not buried here in Halifax. It is a gentleman named Joseph Dawson who shall have coal on board the boiler room of the Titanic. Things did die down quite a bit after this. I personally love that Joseph Dawson got a 15 minutes of fame that I'm sure he had not been expecting on board the boiler room of the Titanic. And I will also tell you that he absolutely kicked off our tourism industry here in Halifax. People coming from all over the place to visit his tombstone, staying in Halifax, decided that it was a pretty nice spot. They'd really like to come back. And they did, and they have, leading us to wonderful things like the Harbor Hopper tour, of course. So you've been thanking for your tour. I will thank you for my job. And we do have an old saying around to this day that the grass on his tombstone grows a little greener and a little taller than all of the other all of the other ones that go around it due to all of the tears that were shed onto it by admirers. So again, if you'd like to go out and visit him, that is at the Fairview Lawn Cemetery. It's a really neat experience just to go and see all the Titanic headstones. And of course, continuing on, Jay Dawson's 15 minutes. Unfortunately, you might recognize this area that we're coming by because it does mean that we are getting back to where we started, meaning that this tour is almost at an end. Thank you.